So this is 22nd of April 2016, and this piece is about a slightly morbid subject in some ways, but just the same as we're all born sometime, we have to all pass away sometime. And maybe it's because I had to go to a funeral recently, one of my aunties, but you do get to an age where you start to think about your mortality a bit more, and anyone will tell you when one of your heroes dies, and I'm not saying the prince who's just passed away, with somebody saying it was a flu-like symptom so they think it might be Zika virus. I'm not saying that he was one of my heroes, but I mean in general, when somebody passes away that you have some connection with or look up to in some way, or liked something that they did, like the music or the movies or whatever, you generally start to feel a little bit more mortal when that happens. But there's to notch you down a little bit from there, there's an interesting and clever is almost the word I'd use to describe it, virus that I'd like to talk about. Now, it's confusing this, it took me a while to understand what people were talking about. When I was a kid, there was a girl, I remember being on the school bus and I hadn't seen her for ages, you know, as a teenager, and I said, "Oh, I'm not seeing you around here, was it?" And she was off for like 3 months or 4 months or something, and she had glandular fever. I didn't have any idea what glandular fever was, and I never did have any idea what it was until I was well into my 30s. And the thing about glandular fever is, in America they call it MONONUCLEOSIS, which I tend to refer to it as because it seems like a more useful term for it, because that's a technical term to do with what it does, whereas glandular fever, I'm not sure it tells you a damn thing. Okay, you get swollen glands, that happens quite a lot. They tracked the virus down to being something called the Epstein Barr virus. Now, the Epstein Barr virus is sneaky. Once you contract it, it takes about 7 weeks. You can, they say it's 6 to 8 weeks, but it takes about 7 weeks for the symptoms to appear. I could backtrack my contraction of the illness. I mean, once I heard this, that it took 6 to 8 weeks, I immediately went to the calendar, having a slight suspicion about this, and I backtracked. And I'll try not to be rude about it. I could trace it back to a particular female. It was to the day. So they call it the kisses disease, but I tend to view it as an STD. To me, that's much more like what it is. I would say that by the time you've got to the stage where you're contracting it by kissing, you and the other person must be on the verge of having sex, because it's awfully close to it. You know, it's a significant transfer of fluid or whatever. So that's like, it's, once you track that back, you think, well, your first reaction is, you dirty bastard. It really is, because I mean, it depends how it hits you, of course, but I spoke with, because the guy sought me out, the guy who had it that she had been with previously. I mean, this is all pretty horrible, but the guy came up to me, I'm just keeping my iPad alive, and he said he had glandular fever. He was off for several weeks with it, but it was then that just put the seal on it. It meant that virtually to the day, by saying 7 weeks from when I got a serious symptom, waking up feeling like mud, feeling like, you know, the worst flu in the world had hit you, because that's basically what Epstein Barr, glandular fever, mononucleosis is like. Massive fatigue. Okay? Now, the whole story of this is that you never get rid of Epstein Barr. Once someone's donated that present to you, you are stuck with it for life. You never ever get rid of Epstein Barr. So, how can I put this? If somebody had told me way back when that women that put it about a lot not only are prone to passing on diseases like syphilis and stuff, which to my knowledge I've never had, but they are certainly prone to passing on any other thing that they could possibly transmit. And one of those things would be a virus like Epstein Barr that never goes away. If I had known that that was the sort of thing that would happen, I haven't been with many people in that way in my life, not many at all. But if I had known that, it'd have been a lot less. Because to get an illness that you then go and get antibiotics for in the modern world, and you know, it's really unfortunate, horrible, embarrassing, and all the rest of it. Okay. But to get one that you can't get rid of, and that's what Epstein Barr is, because the virus hides itself in your system. It hides behind cells or whatever. It sneaks. It just literally goes undercover, camouflages itself in whatever biochemical terms, like physiological terms that could be. And then when your system gets really tired, your immune system, Epstein Barr makes itself active again. So it's extremely sophisticated in what it does. It doesn't just come and go. It comes to stay. And 90% of people on the planet will die with Epstein Barr in their system. I mean, if you wondered how serious it is, that's how serious it is. And the biggest problem I had was fatigue. There are like American football players who have got it, and they've gone back because they're pretty fit young guys, you know. They've gone back, and of course they're quite attractive to women. So you know, my point about how you get this virus probably holds true. And they go back to play football, and they might be back within 6 weeks or 2 months or something. But a lot of people say don't rush it, because actually this has a long tail. Mononucleosis, the Epstein-Barr virus illness, has a long tail to it. And one guy in particular went back to play football, American football, and he wasn't back on form for a year. And they reckon if he delayed going back to play football by 5 months or something, he might have been more like, you know, he could have got back on his form by 1 or 2 months' time after that. So it's not untrue to say that a lot of people will have 6 months of quite a big hit on their life. Now that's if you are otherwise perfectly healthy. If you otherwise have an underlying illness, which unfortunately for me and a lot of people, they do have, that really can multiply the effect. And I can honestly say, although I went back to work after 6 months, I only did that to stop losing my job. It was actually more like a year before I felt anywhere near right. And I can honestly say I never got back to full fitness after that. I was very fit before it happened, although I was prone to tiredness because of the illness I've got, the underlying illness. I've got a chronic illness that also is incurable. But Epstein-Barr on top, causing mononucleosis. No chance. So, it was interesting what happened though. I went to the local GP, and you're going to find this if you have illnesses from time to time. I'm afraid I had an illness which took 6 to 8 years to diagnose, and it was pretty serious, and the symptoms were absolutely clear cut, it turns out. I didn't know that. A doctor didn't know it apparently, but the consultant says it's the clear cut symptoms. Very clear case. Great. So how come I didn't get diagnosed for 6 to 8 years? I don't want to go into it. But mononucleosis or glandular fever, I went to the doctor and they said more or less there was no point in doing a test. Now this isn't the first time I've heard that story. Well, maybe it was the first time, but for cost reasons probably the NHS doesn't want to do much investigation. So the sad fact is I went there not interested. I didn't really know what was going on. I should be fair, I didn't know what was going on at first. Remember, I just thought I had a massive flu, and then it became apparent to me this was something really a whole different game. I was flat out all day. I could be up for maybe an hour. If I was lucky, I had enough time to go down to the shop, buy some food, because I lived alone, and put the food in the fridge or whatever, and then that was it. I was absolutely flat out. So, yes, so at first when I went to the doctor, I didn't know what I had. So I went to the doctor, nothing, he just said take plenty of fluids and rest. Okay, doc, you know, I've got a job, you know, I'm not going in. People only put up with that for so long. And I rang up my sister-in-law, of all people, I just said, I don't know what I've got, I was talking about it. And she said, it sounds like you've got glandular fever. So I have to take my hat off to Auntie Jan, because she was so right. And I went down to doctors saying this, can't it be tested for? And for some reason, which I still don't quite understand, I can only assume it's due to cost, they still refuse to do any kind of test. This is complex to me, confusing, I don't understand. However, the next thing I did was, I was so desperate. I went privately to a doctor literally 1.5 miles down the road. Maybe not even 1.5 miles. No, it's less than a mile. And paid 30 quid for the test. And the test came back positive. They test if you've got the Epstein Barr virus. And I had it. That I understand now is what he was testing for. And I was so relieved. I thought, oh God, at least I know what I've got, because I've had this before with my underlying illness. That decades before I'd contracted is not the right word, but I had it. So this all becomes a multiplying effect. Not only are you seriously ill with something, but for some reason the NHS didn't want to find out where it was, and wouldn't spend, well, I spent 30 quid and found out where it was, so why they couldn't spend 30 quid and put my mind at rest, and so we knew the prognosis then was 6 months of not knowing what the heck was going on, knowing that I couldn't go to work, not knowing whether I'd be well one day and ill the next, Anyway, the whole point was for 6 months I was dead. I shouldn't have gone back to work after 6 months. I should probably have just let the job go. That is a fact. Looking back on it, I probably should. Instead, I went back to work and struggled for the next 2.5 years, until finally I was just absolutely exhausted. And this can happen to people. And it was over. The work was not helpful. The work was quite stressful, and nobody was training you, so you did training on your holidays and stuff. It was very, very difficult, and there were people there who didn't understand, because most of the people that worked there didn't have the kind of job that we had in my department. So it was a different world for them. They quite often went away on training and they had time to do stuff. And for them to be in a rush was unusual. And in my department, the IT department, to be in a rush was actually incredibly usual. And it was usual that stuff was late, and it was usual that people didn't appreciate what you did. That totally became the norm. To the extent where I think it was the fire service I worked in, and the chief fire officer one day came down to the department when our boss left and said, there's nobody now to protect you, looking at us all. I thought, what? He just hated the IT department. So after that, you knew that the guns were out, and you thought, oh great, this is fantastic. And of course that's what happens when people have no idea what goes on in your world of work. They assume, they imprint on your world of work what happens in their world of work. They go to work, play pool, mess around, have to keep fit, get trained for blocks of weeks at a time, and it's all quite by the numbers. You would go to work and you've already been struggling the previous evening with some problem at home or late working at the workplace, doing stuff with not enough resources. I remember backing up a machine which was the whole fire service headquarters relied on it, and I backed it up without a safety net, as it were. I had no way of doing it safely, so I just had to take a load of information from a whole bank of disk drives and put it into a load of disk drives on another machine, and I just had to hope that it would work, because I had no way to back up the system and there was no time to do anything about it. So I just made sure everything was working as best it could, and then I took my chance. But the point is, you're doing this as somebody who is tired and is under the influence of something like mononucleosis, as well as any underlying illness. Do not expect people at work to be understanding. Their worldview, their Weltanschauung, their whole outlook, their mindset is based on how their life is. And that is why most people don't really understand how other people's lives are, because they just think it must be like theirs but slightly different. And usually it's not like that at all. Usually it's massively different. So the mononucleosis thing is, in the end, there's a vital thing I want to mention. In the end, the most important thing about it is it never goes away. Now you think to yourself, why does it never go away? Now, first of all, there's one other thing I want to point out. That woman who I was tracing back my catching of mononucleosis to, she never had any symptoms that anyone could detect. So she was a carrier, not somebody who actually suffered. So while you could call her a victim of Epstein Barr, she was an almost symptomless victim. So the guy got it, she got it from him, she had no symptoms, and maybe mild flu-like symptoms, and then passed it on. And that's what you get. Now, I didn't know this, of course. It took me years to find this out. And there's one really important thing I've got to mention. Because it never goes away, you might think to yourself, now nature doesn't do that without no reason. Well, it turns out it never really is completely inactive. Yes, it hides itself, but as soon as your immune system's weak enough, it comes out to play. Now that is something that I deliberately looked for, which is why I found it, because I'd wondered about this. So you have this really quite serious virus that doesn't let go. And your immune system can be weakened by several things. But obviously anything like AIDS would do it. You know, HIV would crack you for that. Anything that damages your immune system, even perhaps a heavy flu would do it. Because remember, flu is an Epstein Barr. So you can have flu and Epstein Barr and anything else you got wrong with you. Just because you're ill doesn't mean you can't get sick. So in the end, you could be an old person in a bad winter and have a bad dose of flu, and that's when Epstein Barr virus will come out to play, and suddenly mononucleosis in effect occurs. We've got the Zika virus now, which you think Prince has died of, and you know just what the world needs, another fatigue-inducing virus. So this is what you're faced with. One more thing can cause your immune system to run down, and certain illnesses are treated by something called biologic drugs, DMARDs, and they do something to do with T cells, which I'm not going to go into because I'm not going to profess to really understand it. Pardon me, that'd be quite wrong. But I do understand enough to know that it depletes the immune system in order to stop part of the immune system response from causing problems that in some people it causes. So this isn't HIV, but this is something, there's a lot of illnesses that have an immune system component, and this is something where you deplete the ability of the immune system in one sense, and it's particularly in rheumatoid arthritis or something. So you take an injection, and these biologic medicines, these DMARDs, diminish the immune system a bit. And if you get the balance right of how many injections you take and so on, you can try and balance it up. But my point is, if your body immune system, and that means your body in general, gets very tired and fatigued, you can find yourself facing another bout of mononucleosis. And how are they going to test for that? You've already got Epstein Barr. If they were to test again, they might or might not find Epstein Barr, but that doesn't really matter. You've got it. It comes out to play, the Epstein Barr virus, causing glandular fever stroke mononucleosis. And it's able to revive. And that's the thing that I was looking for and found out it can do. Epstein Barr, mononucleosis, glandular fever is able to recur. And once you've got the virus, there's no known case of it going away. Okay? So, everybody out there, never mind your STDs that you can cure with antibiotics. I'm just saying a little word of caution. You don't want to get Epstein Barr, and yet 90% people go to the grave with it. So you might want to consider, especially guys or girls, if you're with somebody who you think's had a lot of partners, you might want to consider just reining back in your excitement a bit, because it's a few moments enjoyment, and it's nearly as bad as or as good as having a baby. It's a lifetime of having a potential problem, and it could be the thing that in the end finishes you off as it leaps into play while you're 80 years old and you've got a bad bout of flu. So just be aware that life isn't all fun and games, and some people who go around putting themselves about a lot, they do collect diseases and they do pass them on. So that's Epstein Barr, something to be well aware of. Thanks for watching and listening.